Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The first thing Brielle Ashwin felt was laughter. Not soft laughter, not kind laughter. It cut through the cold night air like a blade. She stood in the center of the Stormfang pack clearing, boots sinking into wet snow, her thick cloak clinging to her body. Torches burned bright around her, smoke rising into the dark Montana sky above Ravenshade Ridge. Wolves circled in human form, their breath fogging the air. Someone shoved her shoulder. She stumbled. She thought the alpha would choose her, a voice sneered. Brielle kept her head down. She had learned to do that years ago. Her cheeks burned hotter than the fire pits. She knew what they saw when they looked at her. Too big, too quiet, too soft, a nobody, and tonight was the mating selection. Tonight, Alpha Tauren Kalecrest would choose his Luna. Lysandra Valere stood near the front, tall and golden, her silver dress clinging perfectly to her slim body. She didn't look at Brielle directly. She didn't need to. The smirk on her lips said enough. Tauren stood on the stone platform, carved from the mountain itself. Broad shoulders, dark hair tied at the nape of his neck. His wolf power rolled off him in waves that made Brielle's knees weak. She had loved him quietly for years. Loved the way he spoke gently to elders. Loved the way he carried the weight of leadership. She never thought he would choose her. She just wanted to be near him. Just once. Tauren's gaze swept across the crowd. It passed over her, moved on. Her heart cracked, but she'd expected that. Then it happened. A sharp sting exploded at the side of her neck. Brielle gasped. The world tilted. Heat flooded her veins like fire. Under her skin, the crowd went silent. She lifted trembling fingers to her neck and felt something raised, burning, pulsing. Gasps rippled outward. Tauren stood frozen on the platform, eyes wide. The scent of pine and lightning filled the air. A mark glowed faintly beneath Brielle's fingers. The alpha mark. Impossible. No alpha had ever marked without touching, without biting, without choosing. Yet the symbol burned on her skin, ancient and silver, shaped like a crescent claw. Lysandra's scream broke the silence. "This is a trick!" she shouted. Caspian Rourke, the beta, stepped forward, eyes dark with confusion. Eldra Renfall pushed through the crowd, her old hands reaching for Brielle's chin. "Let me see." Brielle's legs shook as Eldra brushed her fingers over the mark. The old healer inhaled sharply. "It's real," a murmur exploded. Tauren descended from the platform slowly, every step deliberate. His gaze locked onto Brielle's, and for the first time she saw something there she had never seen before. Fear, not of her, of what this meant. Tauren stopped inches from her. The heat from his body wrapped around her like a storm about to break. "I did not mark you," he said, voice low and rough. Brielle believed him. That terrified her more. Because if he didn't do it, then who did? And why did it feel like her wolf, quiet, hidden, ignored for years, was finally waking up? The mark burned brighter. The wind howled across Ravenshade Ridge. Somewhere in the dark forest beyond the torches, a wolf answered with a long, haunting cry. Not Stormfang, not familiar. Brielle's heart pounded as Tauren's hand lifted toward her neck, then stopped just short of touching her. The air between them crackled with power, and every wolf in the clearing understood one thing at the same time. The alpha might not have chosen her, but something older had, and it had just begun. Snow had not always felt like knives against Brielle Ashwin's skin. When she was a child, Ravenshade Ridge had been magic. She used to chase frost patterns on cabin windows and pretend they were maps leading somewhere better. Back then, her mother, Karen Ashwin, would kneel and brush snowflakes from Brielle's dark curls, smiling like the world had not already decided her daughter was too much of something, too large, Too slow to shift, too quiet. Brielle had not shifted at 12 like the other girls. Not at 13, not at 14. By 16, whispers followed her everywhere. A wolf without a wolf, a burden to the pack. Her mother would squeeze her hands and whisper, "Strength doesn't always roar." Then Saren died the winter Brielle turned 17, fever taking her in 3 silent nights. After that, the whispers grew louder. Stormfang Pack valued power, speed, beauty. Lysandra Valere had all 3. She shifted early and often, her silver gray wolf sleek and admired. When she ran through the trees, males watched. Females envied. Brielle learned to stay out of sight. She worked in the kitchens, hauled wood, cleaned training grounds after sparring sessions ended. She avoided mirrors because they only confirmed what everyone else saw. Round cheeks, broad hips, thick arms. She ate alone behind the supply shed. She laughed softly so it wouldn't draw attention. Only Junia Morrow treated her like she mattered. Junia, with her sharp tongue and messy braids, would sit beside Brielle in the dirt and say, "They fear what they don't understand." Brielle never believed that. Fear meant power. No one feared her. Torin Kalecrest became Alpha 2 years ago after his father fell in battle against rogues. The day he took leadership, thunder rolled across the mountains, though the sky was clear. Brielle had watched from the back of the crowd, heart swelling. He was younger than most Alphas, harder around the edges, but when he spoke, his voice held steady. He promised protection, growth, unity. He trained harder than anyone. Bled for the pack. Brielle admired him from shadows. Once, during a winter supply run, she slipped on ice near the riverbank. Before she could stand, a strong hand had gripped her elbow. Torin's hand. He had not looked disgusted, not amused, just concerned. "Careful," he said quietly. That one word replayed in her mind for months, but admiration was not love returned. Torin rarely looked her way after that. His time belonged to strategy meetings and border patrols, and increasingly to Lysandra. The pack assumed Lysandra would become Luna. She trained beside him, laughed beside him, stood beside him during council. Brielle told herself she did not mind. She was realistic. She knew her place. What she did not know was why her chest tightened whenever Torin's eyes darkened during full moon gatherings, why her skin tingled when he walked past. She blamed it on foolish dreams. Dreams had no place in Stormfang, especially not for someone like her. The night before the mating selection, Brielle had stood alone at her mother's old grave near the Pine Ridge. Snow drifted softly around the stone marker. "I'll leave after tomorrow," she whispered to the frozen earth. She had decided it. If Torin chose Lysandra, Brielle would ask Eldra for permission to join a distant allied pack as a worker. Somewhere she could start over. Somewhere no one knew the girl who never shifted. A branch snapped in the trees behind her. She turned, expecting Junia. Instead, a pair of amber eyes watched from the dark forest. Not Stormfang gold, not familiar. They vanished before she could blink. Brielle told no one. Now back in the clearing, with the alpha mark burning bright against her skin, that memory slammed into her like ice water. Torin had not touched her, yet the mark pulsed with his scent. Pine, storm air, iron, and beneath it something else. Something wild, ancient. Caspian's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "Everyone back to your cabins, now." Wolves hesitated. Power trembled in the air like a coming earthquake. Torin finally let his fingers brush the edge of the glowing mark. Brielle sucked in a breath. The contact sent a shock through both of them. His eyes flashed wolf gold. "This changes everything," he said, more to himself than to her. Brielle's stomach dropped, because she realized something terrifying in that moment. She had planned to leave, but whatever marked her was not asking permission. The clearing emptied slowly, but no one truly left. Curtains shifted in cabin windows. Shadows moved behind tree trunks. Stormfang was watching, always watching. Brielle stood rooted in the snow, while Torin and Caspian argued in low voices a few steps away. The mark at her neck pulsed softer now, but the heat had sunk deeper. threading through her veins like liquid light. She felt different, not thinner, not suddenly beautiful, but steadier, like something inside her had lifted its head after years of sleeping. Torn turned back to her at last. His jaw was tight. "You're coming to the council hall." It was not a request. Brielle nodded, though her heart pounded so loud she thought everyone could hear it. The council hall smelled of cedar smoke and old stone. A long wooden table cut through the center, carved with wolf sigils passed down through generations. Eldra Renfall lit more candles, her weathered face unreadable. Caspian leaned against the far wall, arms folded, tension in every line of his body. Torrin remained standing, always standing, as if sitting would make him vulnerable. Brielle felt enormous in the small wooden chair offered to her. She kept her hands folded in her lap. "Marks do not appear without intent," Eldra said quietly. "The bond requires alpha blood, or ancient magic." The room went still. Torrin's gaze flickered to Brielle again, searching her face, like she held answers she didn't know existed. "I did not mark her," Torrin repeated, slower this time. "Not defensive. Certain," Caspian exhaled sharply. "Then someone is challenging your claim." The words hung heavy. Brielle's stomach twisted. Challenging an alpha meant war. "Impossible," Torrin said, but his voice lacked full conviction. Eldra stepped closer to Brielle and tilted her chin gently toward the candlelight. The silver crescent claw shimmered faintly beneath her skin. "It is bonded to his aura," Eldra murmured, "but not placed by his will." Brielle swallowed. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Her voice sounded small in the stone room. Eldra's eyes softened. "It means, child, something older than this pack has chosen you both." A knock shattered the quiet. Junia burst in without waiting for permission, snow clinging to her boots. "Rogues at the northern border," she said breathlessly. "3 spotted. Watching." Torrin's head snapped toward Caspian. "How long?" "Minutes," Junia replied. Brielle's chest tightened. Rogues rarely lingered. They tested weakness. And tonight, Stormfang looked fractured. Torrin moved toward the door but stopped beside Brielle. For one brief second, his hand hovered near her shoulder. Protective instinct flickered across his face before he masked it. "Stay here," he ordered. Brielle almost laughed. "Stay safe. Stay hidden." That had been her entire life. But something in her rebelled. The wind howled against the hall walls as distant wolf calls echoed through Ravenshade Ridge. Brielle rose slowly from her chair. The mark at her neck throbbed once, twice, like a heartbeat not her own. She met Torrin's eyes. "If this mark binds me to you," she said quietly, "then hiding won't undo it." Caspian stared at her like she'd grown fangs. Junia's mouth parted in surprise. Torrin studied her in a way he never had before, not dismissing, not overlooking, measuring. The air between them sparked again, subtle but undeniable. Outside, another howl rose. Closer this time, not Stormfang. Brielle felt it, in her bones. Whoever had been watching her at her mother's grave had not been a coincidence, and now they were at the border. Torrin's voice dropped low, edged with steel. "You don't even know how to shift." The words were not cruel. They were factual, and they stung. Brielle held his gaze anyway. Maybe that's about to change. The candles flickered violently as if in response. For a split second, something flashed behind Torrin's eyes. Not doubt, not fear, recognition. As though part of him had been waiting for this answer. Caspian rushed toward the door. "We can debate destiny later. They're breaching." Torrin finally turned, issuing orders as he strode into the storm. Brielle followed 2 steps behind before anyone could stop her. The night swallowed them whole, and in the forest beyond the borderline, amber eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. Snow exploded beneath pounding boots as Stormfang wolves shifted mid-run, bones cracking, fur bursting through, skin in fluid flashes of silver and gray. Brielle stumbled behind them in human form, breath tearing from her lungs. The cold bit hard at her cheeks, but the mark at her neck burned like a hidden sun. She could smell everything tonight, the sharp tang of pine sap, the metallic scent of fear, the faint unfamiliar musk drifting from beyond the tree line. That had never happened before. Her senses had always been dull compared to the others. Torin's massive dark wolf surged ahead, powerful and controlled, moonlight flashing along his fur. Caspian flanked him. Junia shifted beside a fallen log. Her russet wolf crouched low. Brielle stopped at the ridge edge, heart hammering, staring down at the northern border. 3 rogue wolves stood in the clearing below, lean, scarred, watching. They did not attack. They waited. One stepped forward, larger than the others, his coat a deep ash brown. His eyes lifted straight to Brielle, not to Torin, not to Caspian, to her. A chill slid down her spine. The rogue shifted into human form without breaking eye contact. Snow clung to his bare shoulders. "Alpha Torin," he called, voice smooth and calm. "You guard something that does not belong to you." A growl ripped from Torin's wolf, deep and thunderous. Brielle's pulse spiked. The rogue smiled faintly. The mark awakens what was buried. Torin shifted back into human form, fury rolling off him like heat from fire. "Leave my territory," he commanded. The rogue's gaze flickered briefly to Torin, then returned to Brielle. "Ask her," he said softly. "Ask her why the forest answers her heartbeat." Brielle's throat tightened. The mark flared painfully, forcing a gasp from her lips. Images slammed into her mind. Ancient trees, a white wolf running alone under a blood-red moon, a symbol carved into stone older than Stormfang itself. She staggered, clutching her head. Junia's wolf whimpered nearby. Caspian stepped protectively in front of Torin, but Torin did not move. His eyes never left Brielle. "Enough games," Torin growled. "Just state your purpose." The rogue leader inclined his head slightly. "Malric Thorn," he introduced himself, as if this were a formal meeting and not a border standoff. "My pack has watched Ravenshade Ridge for years. Waiting." Snow swirled between them. Brielle's ears rang. "Waiting for what?" Malric's gaze sharpened. "The bloodline did not die with Karen Ashwin." Brielle's world tilted. Her mother's name echoed like a gunshot. Torin stiffened visibly. Caspian's expression darkened. Brielle tasted copper on her tongue. "You knew my mother," she whispered, barely audible over the wind. Malric's smile faded into something almost respectful. "She refused what she was. You cannot." Torin stepped forward then, dominance radiating. "She is Stormfang." Malric's eyes hardened. "She is not only Stormfang." The air cracked with tension. Brielle felt torn between two forces she didn't understand, one familiar and steady behind her, one wild and ancient calling from the trees. The mark seared brighter, and for the first time in her life, something inside her answered. Not timid, not weak. A low vibration began in her chest. A growl, small at first, then stronger. Everyone froze. Brielle's hands trembled as sharp heat tore through her spine. Pain shot down her limbs, not like sickness, but like breaking open. She dropped to her knees in the snow, breath ragged. Torin moved instantly toward her, but a blast of invisible force knocked him back a full step. Caspian swore under his breath. Junia circled anxiously. Brielle's vision blurred white. Bones shifted, muscles stretched, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, fur erupted across her skin in a flash of silver-white light. When the brightness faded, a wolf stood where Brielle had fallen. Larger than any female in Stormfang, her coat shimmered pale as moonlight on ice. Her eyes, deep, glowing silver, locked onto Malric. Silence swallowed the forest. Even the wind stilled. And Torin, staring at the wolf no one believed could exist, realized the pack had never been rejecting a nobody. They had been standing beside a legend. The silver-white wolf stood tall in the snow, her breath rising in steady clouds as Stormfang stared in stunned silence. Brielle felt everything differently now. The cold no longer cut her skin. It sang across her fur like wind through tall grass. Every heartbeat in the clearing echoed in her ears. Torrin's pulse thundered the loudest, strong, controlled, shaken. She turned her massive head toward him, unsure how to speak without words. He stared back, his dark wolf shifting restlessly beneath his skin. Awe flickered across his face. Not disgust, not pity, awe. It hit her harder than the transformation itself. For the first time in her life, no one looked at her like she was lacking. They looked at her like she was powerful. Malric. Thorn's voice carried through the stillness. The moonborn bloodline awakens. Brielle's ears twitched at the name. Moonborn. It felt ancient, heavy. Torrin stepped forward, placing himself subtly between her and the rogue leader. Protective, possessive. You will leave, Torrin said, voice steady but edged with steel. Malric did not move. She does not belong to you. The words sliced through the night. Brielle felt a surge of instinctive anger ripple through her wolf. Belong. She belonged to no one. The mark at her neck pulsed again, but this time it did not burn. It strengthened her, feeding something fierce inside her chest. Without warning, Malric shifted back into wolf form and lunged, not at Torrin, but at Brielle. Snow exploded upward as Torrin roared and intercepted him midair. The crash of their bodies shook the ridge. Brielle reacted without thinking. Her wolf leapt forward, larger and faster than she understood, slamming into Malric's flank. The impact sent him skidding across ice. Gasps erupted from Stormfang wolves watching from the tree line. Brielle's paws dug into the earth. She was not slow, not clumsy. She moved like she had done this 100 times before. Malric regained his footing, amber eyes blazing with something that looked like approval. Torrin snarled, stepping beside Brielle's wolf now, rather than shielding her behind him. That shift did not go unnoticed. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the snow. Equal. Caspian and the others formed a protective arc behind them. Malric did not attack again. Instead, he dipped his head slightly, a warrior's acknowledgement. It begins, he said, voice echoing strangely, between wolf and human sound. The forest will not remain divided. With that, he turned sharply and vanished into the dark with his rogues trailing behind him. The silence that followed felt louder than the battle. Brielle's wolf trembled as adrenaline drained away. The clearing blurred slightly. Torrin stepped closer, his wolf finally surfacing in a controlled shift. His dark form towered beside her pale one, heat radiating from him. He brushed his muzzle lightly against her shoulder. Not dominance, not command. Recognition. The contact sent a steady warmth through her body. Something aligned between them, like two halves of a broken cymbal clicking into place. Around them, Stormfang wolves slowly bowed their heads. Not in fear, in respect. Brielle felt it deep in her bones. Everything had changed, and for the first time in her life, she was not standing outside the circle. She was at its center. Morning light broke over Ravenshade Ridge in pale gold streaks, melting frost from pine needles and turning the snow into glittering sheets. Brielle shifted back before sunrise behind the council hall, breath unsteady, limbs trembling from the effort. The change back to human hurt more than the first shift. It felt like folding something vast into a body too small. Junia rushed forward with a thick wool cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders before she could speak. You did that, Junia whispered, eyes shining. Brielle nodded faintly, though her mind spun. She remembered every second. The strength in her muscles, the clarity in her senses, the way the forest seemed to breathe with her. And she remembered Torrin standing beside her, not above her. Word spread fast. By mid-morning, Stormfang gathered again, not in mockery this time, but in restless curiosity. Caspian organized patrol rotations with clipped efficiency, though his gaze flicked often toward Brielle as if recalculating everything he thought he knew. Eldra examined the fading glow of the mark, tracing it gently with wrinkled fingers. Moonborn wolves were protectors long before pack borders existed, she murmured for only Brielle to hear. They bonded with alphas not through choice, but through balance. Brielle swallowed. Balance. She had always felt like excess, Too much weight. Too much silence. Too much longing. Now she felt necessary. Lysandra Valere did not approach until noon. She stood near the training field, posture flawless, silver braid hanging over one shoulder. Her smile was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "You're enjoying the attention," she said lightly when Brielle stepped closer. Brielle felt the old instinct to shrink rise up, but it did not take hold. "I didn't ask for it," she replied evenly. Lysandra tilted her head. "No, but you'll keep it." The softness in her tone did not hide the warning. Torn was meant to lead beside strength. Brielle met her gaze without flinching. "Then he will." Lysandra's jaw tightened just slightly before she turned away. Torn watched that exchange from across the yard. When Brielle approached him later, he dismissed two warriors mid-sentence. The shift in priority did not go unnoticed. They stood a few feet apart, tension humming between them. Not hostile, but charged. "You fought well?" Torn said finally. His voice held no condescension, only truth. Brielle studied him. Up close, she saw exhaustion in the faint shadows under his eyes. He carried more than leadership. He carried expectation. "Why didn't you tell me about Moonborn?" she asked quietly. Torn's expression hardened. "Because I didn't know." He paused, then added, "My father mentioned ancient bloodlines once. I thought they were myths." The wind lifted Brielle's hair gently. A silence stretched between them. "Malric knew," she said. Torn nodded once. "Which means this was planned." His gaze sharpened. "He wanted you to shift." The realization sank heavily into her chest. "Why?" she whispered. Torn stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because something is coming." The words felt like distant thunder. Brielle glanced toward the northern forest, remembering the amber eyes at her mother's grave. She had thought she was invisible her whole life. Forgotten. Unimportant. But someone had been watching. Waiting. As the sun dipped lower, a messenger wolf raced into camp, shifting clumsily near the gates. "Western border breached," he gasped. "But not by rogues." Torn stiffened. "By who?" The messenger hesitated. "By wolves wearing Stormfang colors." A murmur of confusion rippled outward. Brielle felt the mark at her neck pulse once more. Steady, warning, alive. Torn's eyes darkened with sudden understanding. The threat was no longer outside the pack. It was already inside. The training yard erupted into noise. Warriors shifted mid-stride, boots abandoned in snow, as gray and black wolves burst toward the western ridge. Brielle felt the pull instantly, the mark humming like a compass needle. Torn barked orders with sharp precision, his voice slicing through panic. "No one moves alone. Caspian, flank left. Junia, stay with Brielle." The command lingered in the air a beat too long. Brielle caught it. "Stay with Brielle. Protection again." She stepped forward before Junia could answer. "I don't need guarding." Torn's gaze snapped to hers. For a second, old doubt flickered in his eyes. Then he nodded once. "Then run beside me." That small shift felt bigger than any declaration. They reached the western ridge within minutes. Snow churned under frantic paws. Below, 6 wolves stood in Stormfang colors, gray wraps tied at their forelegs, but their stances were wrong. Too rigid, too eager. One stepped forward and shifted into human form. Brielle recognized him instantly. Darian Holt, a mid-ranked warrior who trained with Lysandra often. His lip curled slightly when he saw Torn. "You've grown distracted, Alpha," Darian said. "Chasing myths instead of strength." Torn's wolf surfaced behind his eyes. "You wear my colors and threaten my border?" Darian laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Your border won't survive what's coming." The air turned brittle. Brielle felt. Something deeper than anger moved through her. Betrayal tasted metallic in her mouth. "You're working with Malric," she said quietly. Darian's gaze shifted to her. "We're working for survival." His words were smooth, rehearsed. "The Moonborn line was hidden because it divides packs. You awaken old laws, old wars." Brielle's stomach twisted. She had never asked to awaken anything. Darian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Stand down, Brielle. Refuse the bond, the mark will fade." Torin growled low, stepping in front of her again, but Brielle moved beside him instead. "Refuse?" she echoed. "I didn't even know what I was." Darian's expression hardened. "Exactly," he signaled sharply. Two wolves behind him lunged without warning. Chaos exploded. Caspian intercepted one midair. Junia slammed into another from the side. Torin collided with Darian in a brutal crash of muscle and snow. Brielle shifted in a flash of silver light, bones bending with less pain this time. Her wolf surged forward instinctively, not wild, but precise. She knocked a traitor wolf aside before it could reach Caspian's blind spot. Gasps echoed from Stormfang warriors arriving behind them. This was no rogue attack. This was fracture. Darian and Torin rolled across the ridge edge, claws tearing snow and earth. Brielle sprinted toward them, heart pounding like war drums. Darian snapped viciously, but Torin held dominance with steady strength. "You would fracture your own pack?" Torin roared. Darian's voice came strained but defiant. "Your father kept secrets. The moonborn are not guardians, they are catalysts." Brielle froze for half a heartbeat. "Catalysts for what?" Torin pinned Darian down hard, claws pressed to his throat. "Speak clearly," Torin demanded. Darian's eyes flickered toward Brielle one last time. The balance demands sacrifice. Before anyone could react, a hidden blade flashed from Darian's wrist wrap. It drove, upward, not toward Torin, toward Brielle. Time did not slow, it shattered. Brielle saw the blade only as a silver flicker against white snow. Torin moved first, always first. He twisted violently, knocking Darian's arm off course. The blade sliced across Brielle's shoulder instead of her throat. Pain flared hot and bright. She staggered but did not fall. Her wolf roared, deep, furious, not wounded prey, but rising storm. Torin's answering snarl shook the ridge. He slammed Darian into the frozen ground so hard the earth cracked beneath them. Caspian lunged forward and pinned the traitor's legs while Junia knocked the blade away with a savage snap of her jaws. Blood stained the snow crimson near Brielle's paw. The scent hit every wolf present like lightning. Stormfang warriors encircled them, growls rumbling low and deadly. Darian laughed once, breath ragged. "Too late," he gasped. "It has begun." Torin's claws pressed harder against his throat. "What has?" The wind answered first. A deep vibration rolled through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. Brielle felt it in her bones, the same ancient rhythm from the night she shifted. The mark at her neck flared painfully, brighter than ever before. She stumbled back as light burst beneath her fur. The forest responded. Trees along the ridge shuddered violently. Snow cascaded from branches in blinding sheets. Wolves stepped back instinctively. Brielle's vision blurred as images slammed into her mind. Her mother standing before a stone altar carved with the crescent claw, Torin's father arguing in shadow, Malric watching from the tree line years ago. Secrets layered upon secrets. She gasped and shifted back into human form mid-surge, dropping to her knees in the snow. "Stop," she whispered, though she did not know who she was pleading with. Torin released Darian only long enough to reach her. He knelt beside her, ignoring the blood on her shoulder. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She forced her eyes up to his. His hands hovered over her skin but did not touch without permission. That restraint steadied her more than anything else. "You're not a sacrifice, mine's," he said, voice firm. "You're not a weapon." Darian spat blood into the snow. She is balance, and balance destroys before it rebuilds. Caspian struck him silent with the back of his hand. The ground trembled harder. From beyond the western tree line, a massive white wolf emerged, larger even than Brielle's form. Its fur shimmered like moonlight. Stormfang wolves bowed instantly, confusion mixing with instinctive reverence. Brielle's breath caught painfully in her chest. It was not Malric. It was older. The wolf's silver eyes locked onto Brielle, and when it spoke, the voice echoed inside every mind present. The bond awakens the gate, and the earth beneath Ravenshade Ridge split open. The ground tore apart with a thunderous crack, splitting the western ridge in a jagged line that glowed faintly from within. Wolves stumbled back as snow and stone cascaded into darkness. Brielle felt the pull instantly, not downward, but inward. The mark at her neck blazed like a living flame. The enormous white wolf stepped closer to the edge of the fracture, its silver eyes never leaving hers. Torn rose beside her, one arm braced firmly around her waist to steady her. "What gate?" he demanded into the charged silence. The ancient wolf's voice echoed again, not through air, but through bone. The gate between divided blood and united power. Darian laughed weakly from the ground where Caspian restrained him. "Now you see," he rasped. Stormfang hid the truth. The moonborn were sealed away generations ago. Your father knew. Torrin's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. Brielle's stomach dropped. "Sealed away?" she whispered. The ancient wolf's gaze softened slightly. "Your mother refused to open what others feared. She chose love over legacy." Images flooded Brielle's mind. Karen kneeling in snow, pressing her hand against glowing stone, whispering goodbye. Tears blurred Brielle's vision. Her mother had not been weak. She had been protecting them. The crack in the earth widened another inch. Wind roared upward from its depths, warm and charged with wild energy. Brielle stepped toward it before anyone could stop her. Torrin tightened his hold but did not drag her back. "If I'm the key," she said quietly, "then I decide what opens." The ancient wolf inclined its head. "Balance requires two." Brielle turned to Torrin. For once there were no watchers, no expectations, only truth between them. "You didn't choose me," she said softly, "but the bond is real." Torrin's eyes burned gold in the rising wind. "I choose you now," he answered without hesitation. That choice changed everything. Brielle stepped to the edge of the glowing fracture, Torrin at her side. Together they pressed their palms to the frozen ground. The mark at her neck flared as Torrin's aura surged in response. Power threaded between them, not domination, not ownership, but alignment. The wind inside the crack howled violently before shifting into something steadier, deeper. Brielle felt her wolf expand, not outward in rage, but inward in control. She was not opening a prison. She was dissolving a wall. The earth trembled once more, and then stilled. Light rose from the crack instead of darkness. Warm, silver light that spread outward across the ridge like dawn breaking underground. The ancient wolf stepped back, satisfaction in its gaze. The gate was never meant to unleash war, it spoke into their minds. It was meant to reunite what fear divided. Behind them, Stormfang wolves lifted their heads slowly. No chaos, no monsters emerging, only silence and clarity. Darian sagged in Caspian's grip, confusion replacing defiance. Torrin stood taller beside Brielle, not as a ruler defending territory, but as a leader standing beside his equal. The fracture in the ridge sealed itself gradually, leaving only a faint silver line across the snow. The ancient wolf's form began to fade into drifting light. "The moonborn do not conquer," it whispered. "They anchor." Its eyes lingered on Brielle one last time. "Lead with balance." Then it vanished completely, leaving only wind and stunned silence. Brielle exhaled shakily, the mark at her neck cooling into a steady warmth rather than burning flame. She turned toward the gathered pack. For years they had laughed, whispered, looked past her. Now they looked at her differently, not with fear, with recognition. Silence stretched across Ravenshade Ridge long after the silver light faded. Snow drifted softly over the sealed fracture, as if the mountain itself were calming down. Brielle stood at the center of the western ridge, wind tugging gently at her hair, the mark at her neck glowing faint and steady like a heartbeat. That had finally found rhythm. Around her, Stormfang wolves slowly shifted back into human form. No one laughed, no one whispered. Even Lysandra stood still, her perfect posture softened by something close to awe. Caspian released Darien, who no longer looked defiant, only small. The threat had not been an invading army, it had been fear, and fear had almost torn them apart. Torrin stepped forward first, not as Alpha commanding obedience, but as a man choosing truth. He faced the pack, voice carrying clearly through the cold air. Stormfang was built on strength, he began, but strength without balance becomes pride. His gaze flickered to Brielle briefly before returning to the gathered wolves. My father hid the moonborn legacy because he feared division. That fear created division anyway. Murmurs rippled, but no one interrupted. Torrin extended his hand toward Brielle in full view of everyone. This bond was not forced. It was revealed, and I will not deny it. Not. Brielle's heart pounded as she stepped beside him. For years, she had imagined standing near him, but never like this. Not as someone chosen by destiny, chosen by him. She faced the pack as well, forcing her voice to remain steady. I never wanted power, she admitted. I wanted to belong. The words were simple, but they carried weight. If the moonborn anchor balance, then I won't stand above you. I will stand with you. Her eyes found Darien briefly. And no wolf here will be cast aside for fear of what they might become. The statement hung heavy in the air. For some it meant forgiveness. For others, accountability. Lysandra stepped forward unexpectedly. Snow crunched beneath her boots. She met Brielle's gaze directly for the first time without superiority behind it. Stormfang needs unity, Lysandra said carefully. Not rivalry. It was not an apology, but it was surrender of something sharp and unnecessary. Brielle inclined her head slightly. That was enough. Caspian ordered Darien taken to council confinement rather than exile. The decision mattered. Balance over bloodshed. The pack watched Brielle closely, not because of her size, not because she had shifted late, but because she had chosen restraint when power had been handed to her. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Torrin remained beside her. The tension between them felt different now, no longer fragile, but intentional. You plan to leave, he said quietly, not accusing. Brielle gave a small, honest nod. I thought I was excess. Torrin's hand lifted slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. His fingers brushed just below the mark at her neck. Warmth spread through her skin. You were never excess, he said softly. You were untapped. A faint smile touched her lips. You didn't see me. Torrin's gaze held no defense. I do now. The wind shifted gently across Ravenshade Ridge, carrying the scent of pine and something lighter. Hope, perhaps. Brielle looked out across the mountains she had once planned to abandon. They felt different today. Not because the land had changed, but because she had. She was still broad-shouldered, still soft in places others might not understand. But her wolf stood tall within her, no longer hidden. She was not a legend meant to conquer. She was balance meant to anchor. Torrin intertwined his fingers with hers, openly, without hesitation. Below them, Stormfang resumed its rhythm, warriors training, elders advising, snow melting under afternoon sun. And for the first time in her life, Brielle Ashwin did not feel like a fat nobody rejected by her pack. She felt like a Luna who had chosen herself. And everything after that would grow from balance. If this story moved you, even a little, go ahead and hit the like button so more people can discover it. And tell me in the comments, at what moment did you realize Brielle was never a nobody? Was it when she shifted? When Torrin chose her? Or when she chose herself? If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or rejected, this story was for you. Sometimes the very thing people mock is the power they're afraid of. Subscribe for more emotionally gripping werewolf romances and cinematic shifter stories. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey. Until next time, stay strong, stay balanced, and remember, your power doesn't need permission to awaken.